Hi everyone, welcome to another session. So in today's session, we're going to talk about the issues in implementation of a strategy. All right, let's have a kind of a recap on what we covered so far. So we're looking into external appraisal, we're looking into threat and opportunity in environment as well as the key success factors. Then we're looking into internal appraisal and we're looking into different models and methods and all those things that we're looking into. And then we're looking into all the social responsibility, creation of a strategy, managerial values, all of this to come into evaluation, choice of a strategy, of course, and then come to this session when we're going to talk about implementation of the strategy. It is very important when we're implementing a strategy, we manage to answer these three important questions. Who will carry out the plan? What must be done? And how are they going to do it? What is needed, right? If we cannot basically answer to these questions, or the answer is not complete or not reaching to anywhere, that means the implementation is not correct or it's not taught very well. Let's talk about planning and control. Well, basically in planning, we build levels of control and in like coordinations into the goals and into those action plan that we already decide or we already having. So control is like a checking or aligning the goals with that of the organization. And also coordination, it's about allowing the information and procedures to be captured. So when we talk about planning and control, it is not just about implementing a strategy plan, but also implementation coordinations, or how do we coordinate those action plans, and how do we control to make sure that it is on the right planning and it is feasible. So there are many issues with the implementation. It's all about how to manage it, things within a proper time frame, how to provide a good leadership, and how to disseminate information and through the team, through the organization, or through different part of organization. So part of the implementation involve training of a staff, training of different department to ensure that the staff are aware on how to perform the new task, and also have proper procedure to capture the task, and how to define the task and how to break down the task in the organization. Now, it's also required like a delicate balance between intuition and planning. So lots of things we might take it for granted. For example, based on intuition, we need to do this and we need to do that. But based on planning, it's best in capture the face in a document in Word and disseminate the words to the organization. So many of the time, organizations base a decision on sometimes gut feeling, and these feelings may work in an organization for few people, and where the coordinations and control is not a big issue. But when we're talking about organization involving more than 100 people, large organization, then it's best to capture the information as much as possible within like a documentation and allowing this documentation to be disseminated. But dissemination news and documentation is inadequate because we need to ensure that people read and understand the action plan. So it's involve lots of training and planning to the organization or to the people of the organization. And there must be finally a strong relationship between the people who formulate the plan and the people that basically implements the plan. So nobody will get a planet as a part of the team to implement the plan. Otherwise, there will be a divide, a great divide between the people who have the certain ideas to analyze the strategy and the people who picks up the documents to implement the plan, because there are lots of knowledge. It's might be like a tacit knowledge, and which is find it very hard to transmit between departments and between parties. So, in implementation and defining what must be done, it is often easy to break down what, for example, what plans are we implementing, right? Or how do we break down this plan into smaller sub plans that are responsible by different departments? For example, we can broken down into the smaller sub strategies. For example, if you're talking about strategies, and uh, we do have different strategies. For example, the corporate strategy, which is a bigger plan, but corporate strategies can be divided into smaller or sub strategies, which are kind of functional strategies. So, in order to realize the bigger strategy, for example, different departments, like for example, finance, marketing, they need to execute a smaller functional strategy to in order to align themselves to the bigger corporate strategy. So first step of what must be done includes dividing them into sub-strategy into those departments that are responsible. So we need to draw a bigger program that is incorporates timeline, and of course action plan, and of course identifying um, those people that are responsible for those action plans and those achieving the timelines. And this is part of like a project management that some of you might already understand that or know it. So implementing a strategy is part of kind of implementing a project. Of course, another important part is cost the program. In order to implement a strategy, certain equipments maybe need to be purchased, or certain manpower maybe need to be procured. If you're thinking some internationalization strategy, you might need to create a new department that may need some sort of employ new staff with those certain skills. So definitely for the program, we always need to cost the program with the appropriate budget that had been set for that program to be able to achieve those strategy at the same time. The next one is procedure. So we need to be able to go into a step by a step in achieving the implementation. The next question is always is about how, and how a strategy is to be implemented, like as part of what. So the how is include taking appropriate organizations. For example, who is involved, how much work is allocated, how the organization supporting getting support, right? So these are very, very important in our implementation. The next step would be allocating the resources and identifying those people fulfilling those tasks. So that's the staff very important. It's very important about the leadership. For example, who is responsible to lead the project or the program to success? Do we have the leader in the organization to support and endorse all those implementations? And of course, it's very important to identify what are the control measure in place that we can see, okay, the implementation was successful or maybe not successful. Let's discuss about strategic planning. So let's recap a strategic planning where we discuss about it from first session. So planning is part of the process where we actually analyze the situation for the organization in which the organization is actually experiencing. So we are determining what are the things need to be done in organizations and what are the goals to advance the organizations that we are focusing on. So basically, we're looking into a strategic planning. It should integrate objectives of the organization and it should integrate them into the policies of the organization. But ultimately, it is more important to allocate resources to different parts of the organization. So it helps to or enable the organization to succeed in their operation as well as achieving its advanced and future goals. So resources are very important, and all the organizations they have limited resources. So it is about whether organizations places the resources in various activities that they might have, or maybe like organization thinking about spending money into machineries or hiring more people to improve the production or process as well. So it's very important and it's related to allocation scarce resources. So strategic planning, it is about allocating scarce resources to help the organization achieve its future goals in the current objective to the best possible manner. And definitely, um, we always need to looking into anticipating and reaction of in or of the intelligent oppositions from the competitors in the sense. So in order for us to implement our strategy and in the strategic planning process, we try to make sure it's well coordinated, especially during time of implementation where more parties are involved. So the process of a strategic planning they only involves certain senior management and certain analysts. So it's very small setup and or is it small means a team of people. But when we're talking about this implementing a strategy, it's probably involved the entire organization and it involve more department for sure. And each department can involve different teams of people and possibly the whole department. So therefore, the coordination is ever more important in realizing the strategy intent. We need to manage change in that respect. So we need to have a mechanism for driving the performance and reach the consensus about whether um, this is the right direction or this is the right decision. And this concession building is not with the top management, but with every member of the organization. That means it makes it very challenging. So as you can imagine, getting the right buying requires the whole organization to believe the what need to do, right? And the leadership or the strategic implementation leaders, they also need to believe the leader is capable of implementing this change successfully, and the organization is right to choosing what is right to do. So communication is ever more important, especially for multinational corporation, where um, the company might have headquarters in different countries, and they need to get every member of the company to know about this change or to buy into this change and support this change into work towards their action plan. Sometimes it can be often too internally focused, and sometimes the strategy become redundant to the environmental change that is happening around the organizations that are operating. Now, let's have a look at in terms of a strategy control and how we can use balance scorecard. So the balance scorecard first introduced by Kaplan and Norton in 1996. It's more than 20 years ago, and this is after what they studied into organizations and what is the good management control for the organization to translate a strategy into operational terms. So balance scorecard, it's been used by many organizations in the last 20 years to measure performance. So used as a tool in terms of the measurement for success, basically. But at the same time, it is originally more to um, to help to allocate resources to be able to implement this strategy. And of course, it has various kind of indicators to make sure that the organization reach the goals in implementing their strategies. So if we're looking at taking a look at this balance scorecard, ultimately, it's the central to the balance scorecard is a strategy or a vision that the organization wants to implement. Now, how this strategy that this company wants to implement, so it's always looking into some other factors. For example, we're looking into the customer to achieve our vision. How should we spread to our customer? When we're looking at the finance to succeed financially, how should we appeal to our stakeholders? Internal business processes to satisfy our stakeholders and customer, what business processes might we excel, and also learning and growth to achieve our vision, how will we sustain. So we can talk about the measurements and performance indicators in the balance scorecard. So from financial perspective, we measure the effect of the strategy to the bottom line. So, for example, how the strategy affect the earning per share, how the strategy affect the return on capital employed, and also what are those value added here. So, for the customer perspective, how the strategy affect the performance in the chosen segments. So for example, we might decide to measure your performance in a specific segments of the market or all the markets. So there are various measures to looking into customer perspective. retention of the customers, satisfactions of the customers, whether we are attracting new customers, and what is the market share? Are we growing into the market share year by year basis? So these are different perspective from um, customers in a balanced score. Then we're looking into internal business process perspective. We can measure against the value chain of the organization. We can measure against the creation of the value to the organization. We can even we can measure what is the number of products produced, what are the year of the products, and etc. So it's up to the organization to define what is a success measurement. Then, from the learning and growth perspective, we talk about employees' retention, skills, training, and also employee satisfactions as well. So these are the various indicators. We want to make sure that we have adequate representations on each perspective. Remember what we're talking about, the internal business process perspective. So these perspectives may involve lots of departments, and we might have some over measurements of these perspectives, or we might need some measurements for that perspective, or we might have some little measurements on the learning growth perspective, which is not good. So we want to make sure that the strategy implementation, it has a good representation of different perspective, and we don't want to have over representation either. So it's recommend that each perspective to have maybe 4 to 7 measures of each of those factors that we're looking into the scorecard, the measures. So overall, the whole organization, they might have around 24, 25 measures, and best used for a single strategy. A good balanced scorecard is always have a mixture of outcome measures, it's like a profit, and at the same time, we need to have certain performance drivers. Those performance drivers like the learning and growth, for example, how this learning and growth or growth in organization can actually help to improve the bottom line. So we don't want the outcome measurement for all the 25 measurements that we mentioned. We want areas that there is opportunities for us to monitor our performance, to grow our performance, rather than just using the bottom line or outcome measures. So there are some issues on balanced scorecards. For example, the balanced scorecard is time lag, or we call it retrospective. So, for example, for the last 6 months, or whatever happened for the last happened in the last 12 months, so it doesn't help the organization to improve on the failures that happened. So it's not real time. Of course, people questions whether the full perspective is deep enough. We don't have a feedback from employees, for example. We don't have feedback from suppliers, for example, as well. A lot of it also driven by leadership and the success of the strategy implementation. But in this balanced scorecard, there's no manager's perceptions and attitude involved as well. Balanced scorecard is all about control. So people have critiques. There's too much emphasis on the control and too much emphasis on the measurements. So we are looking at more of the outcome with the time lag rather than creating a solution on these issues or this the strategy implementation issue. So balanced scorecard doesn't exactly tell you what is the solution to the implementation problem that you're facing. Therefore, the, the this can be iterative process where we constantly review the outcome in order to provide feedback to tweaking the process and the selection the strategy in order to make it into a success. So we can conclude our today's session on some of the implementation and control issues. And thank you very much and all the best.